Now, here's a conundrum. What do you do when, through the demands of work, you find yourself having to live in the inner city? But you have a deep connection to the Australian bush. It's one of the few places where you feel really happy. So what do you do? The city or the country? The city, country. The answer's pretty obvious. Bring as much of the country to the city as you can. And that's what happened in this small but tranquil inner-city Melbourne suburb of Princes Hill. A couple of years ago, this modest Federation-style home underwent a dramatic remodelling. The stylish, contemporary and architect-designed addition demanded an equally stylish and contemporary landscape-designed garden, because for success, one must complement the other.
So I like using these sort of grasses, particularly along pathways, because they're soft and they're nice to walk through with the light.
Meet Laurie McNutt, who for more than a decade has been creating gardens in and around the suburbs of Melbourne. Laurie, you know, I find it amazing that we're only, what, 5 kilometres from the city here. It's so beautifully peaceful. The clients must have wanted to make the most of that.
The brief was to create a bushland garden that had a majority of plants that came from the Gippsland area where they often holiday. And that's where this mass planting came into play. When they do go to Gippsland, they said there's just these mass areas of Dianella and then maybe some shrubs and grasses. So it's, you know, recreating that sense of peace that they get when they go to those places.
How did you establish this vegetation?
These were mainly tube stock. I would say probably 70 to 80% tubes from local Indigenous nurseries.
Putting them in as tube stock not only gets you a better result often, but it gets it for you very inexpensively.
Exactly, and then if something does die, you don't feel like, oh, well, that was a $20 plant that I just lost.
The success of this garden has been achieved by using a mixture of natural hard landscaping materials like stone, wood and gravel, and softening it with a palette of plants that flower at different times through the year. What do you think are the key points about using native plants in home garden design?
I feel the key points are probably creating a contrast of foliage, whether that be through the use of large areas of the same plant, so creating drifts of plants, or using individual plants and creating a contrast, because a lot of the interest in native plants is not just the flowers, but the diversity of colours and sizes of foliage. So, for instance, here I've done a large drift of Dianellas, but surrounded that with individual plants that have, you know, completely different characteristics. Brachyscums and chrysosepalums, and they're some of my favourite plants, and I think because they do give a little burst of joy. I mean, you want a peaceful area of green, but then these little bits of colour and even the red and the grevilleas, and you might find the occasional little wildflower like a chocolate lily just popping up in between the plants. I think that's the essence of the Australian natives, are these delicate flowers that are against some of the larger plants that are a nice little surprise.
The use, too, of the dichondra growing between pavers and on pathways both softens them and adds to the feeling of informality. This versatile plant is one of Laurie's favourites as it thrives in both deep shade and full sun. And once little more than a storage area and a way to get to the front door, the front courtyard has been transformed into a sunny but private contemporary space. The plantings here are beautiful and drought-tolerant, with feature plants adding points of interest. Bluestone pavers and stone bench reference the home's Federation origins. Something I really like about this garden is that it has a tremendous sense of depth. You see, here, there's a wooden screen, and that shelters a service area. In front of it, Vimonaria juncea golden spray, a nice small tree that provides a focus from the house. But look at this. The screen doesn't go the full width of the garden, and that means the planting can extend right the way down into this corner. So it hides the fence, extends the garden as far as it can, but look at that. It goes out beyond that to the golden robinia and the eucalyptus behind, so that it borrows the landscape behind and makes the garden seem as big as it possibly can do.
For me, I guess a garden is home, and it's also an opportunity for me to create something beautiful. So I really enjoy working with plants as a palette because it's ever-changing. Unlike a painting or a sculpture, I get to constantly add to it and change it, and if I don't like the way it turned out the first time, I get to keep adding to it and making it better.
You'd have to say that this garden has succeeded in becoming the peaceful country retreat its owners were craving. And it just goes to show that good garden design can transport you to anywhere in the world you'd like to call home.